Haley, I'm so excited to have you on. I am so appreciative of you taking the time today out of your day. I'm sure you are busy with your world at Under Armour, but for a little bit of context for our listeners, you and I had the privilege of meeting a few years back when our company Swarm was acquired by Three Step Sports, which is the largest youth sports ecosystem in the country. You were working for Under Armour and working on some of the team opportunities with Three Step. You and I had the opportunity to meet, and I absolutely love your energy. You have an infectious energy. You are fired up about women's sports and girls' sports, and that was the first opportunity we had to meet. So I'd love for you to talk about your journey through youth sports, how that influenced those formative years of your life, and kind of we'll kind of get into some of the collegiate stuff in a minute.
Definitely. Thanks again, Alice, for having me on. So I would say probably similar to anyone listening to this podcast, sports has always been a big part of my life and started at a really young age for me. It actually started because I was a big kid. So big as in weight and big as in a head taller than everyone around me, boys and girls. And so my parents were like, we need to get this kid involved in sports so that I could shed some pounds. So originally they put me in soccer. The coach put me at goalie, so that didn't really help me much as far as running. From there, I went to swimming, basketball, and eventually into volleyball some too. So it's kind of funny because my dad is a sports fanatic, but he jokes with me that the reason I originally got involved in sports is just because I was getting to be a little bit on the big side. So me, blissfully unaware of anything as a child. I had an amazing childhood and did not have any sort of concept of my body image at that age. So I just started to fall in love with the sports and naturally kind of gravitated as I got older to basketball and swimming because as I was getting through middle school, looking to high school, and they're the same season, of course, in winter, I had to choose between one. So as I got into high school, I was only a basketball athlete, which I think is more common now because a lot of young athletes are forced to choose at such a young age, especially in the club realm, and if they want to play year round and get collegiate exposure and what have you. But looking back, I kind of wish I would have played some other sports during high school. But so is basketball all the way. Definitely had a goal to play at the next level in college and try to earn a scholarship. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to play at Colorado State. So kind of a mid-major Division I that was local, and then played there for 4 years, graduated in 4, and then did 1 year with Learfield Ram Sports Properties, which probably a lot of people aren't familiar with, but it's at almost every collegiate campus in the country. And really what they do is handle a lot of like the sponsorship deals, naming rights, broadcasting, like the banners hanging up in gyms and at stadiums. So still involved in sports in that aspect and kind of learning the business side for a year. And then from there transitioned to Under Armour and ultimately moved to Baltimore, Maryland.
Amazing.
So, do you want me to kind of talk a little bit into like what my journey was at UA to where I am today?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind going back for a minute and talking about the recruiting process a little bit, and did you specialize in basketball with that understanding my freshman year that you're going to go and look to get that scholarship? And were you playing for a club team? Were you playing for the school team? What were those experiences like?
Yeah, I think like freshman year, maybe I didn't have as much of a concept and wasn't as cognizant of the recruiting portion of playing. I was playing for a club team starting in middle school though. So definitely started to travel, played with a lot of girls outside of where I lived and the schools that I went to, which was fantastic. I met some of my best friends through that. But really the recruiting started to settle in like after freshman year. And then of course, as you get older through high school and, back then, and at least for me, like we didn't have a ton of resources. So like my dad was the one that stepped in a lot and tried to help me sort of decipher, like, is this a generic flyer? Because back then, right, they were just like emailing and sending you physical mail flyers. Like, is this a
Yeah.
generic one? Like, did they even put your name on it? Are they really interested? So there was a lot of combing through to start. And then I think once I got older, started to travel more, my club team was really good. We sent, I think, 7 girls on our immediate team D1. And so we played in a lot of the big tournaments, a lot of big coaches. And so it started to get more serious after sophomore year. And it was very stressful looking back because, again, it was just so new. But I think my dad did a really good job in trying to help me decide what was important to me. Like, is it location? Do you know what you want to do? Like, what are the specialty majors at this school? Which, by the way, I had no clue what I wanted to do in high school and even when I got into college. So, like, that didn't really help me. But, people that are really passionate about what they want to do and they know their path, like, that's a big factor. What is the staff like? What does the roster look like? Like, I was a shooting guard. And so I can remember Gonzaga was like one of the schools that I really wanted to go to. I always loved watching them grow up. But another girl who was a shooting guard in Colorado committed a year prior to me. So then it's kind of like, okay, well, you got to cross that one off the list. So you start to kind of narrow it down based on what's important. And I narrowed it down to 4 schools. And ultimately, I decided to commit to Colorado State, and for a variety of factors. I think it was attractive to me to still be able to be in state. I think that the other one of the schools on the West Coast, and then 2 far on the East Coast, and all my family is kind of middle of the country and in Colorado. So that was important to me. It was an opportunity to rebuild a program that hadn't won in a while, which was really attractive to me. Obviously they have a history of winning because Becky Hammond went there. And so I knew that they, had the capacity to be a big time program. And then there were a lot of other factors as well. And honestly, one of my best friends, who is still my best friend to this day, she was going through a recruiting process. She was on my club team, and it was the only school that we had in common. And it just so happened that we both decided to commit there. So it was a lot different then than it is now. Clearly no social media, the contact rules were different. How often you could contact were different. So I kind of feel lucky in that sense that it was maybe a little bit more clear and you didn't have to do as much of the song and dance as a lot of the athletes do now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, speaking of Caroline, I think there's a lot of parallels between your story and what she was saying about, the recruiting process. And still, obviously, that was a major process through, you're going through high school trying to narrow these schools down, but it does look a lot different right now for the athletes. I mean, just trying to navigate social media, NIL, travel, basketball, the world of, it's just, there's so many components to it right now that I went through the recruiting process at the Division 3 level when I was, and it's even that, I mean, I'm fortunate to be able to kind of have that puristic look of what basketball kind of looked like in the recruiting process. And I'm sure some of the coaches at the collegiate level now are saying the same thing, man, it's a different world than it used to be, even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So you had kind of a privilege to play with one of your friends, which is really cool experience, going into college. So what other, pros and cons going through your collegiate experience did you have at Colorado State?
Yeah, I think anyone would probably answer the same. That far and away the biggest pro is just the friendships that you make. I mean, we had a lot of turnover on our team in 4 years. I mean, it's probably par for the course now with transfer portal, right? But I look at it like I got to meet a ton of different people from a variety of backgrounds, religious backgrounds, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, like everything. And that is the privilege of sport, right? Like that is the best part about being involved in sports, especially at a young age. So I think meeting people and learning lessons and perspectives that I would never have otherwise known was huge for me. Um, I think also like the travel is awesome. We had, especially my first few years, shout out to any of the director of basketball operations at the collegiate level. We had an incredible one. And she made sure that, you know, if we were going to be traveling to some of these places, like if there was time, we squeezed in something fun to do that was unique to that city. So I look back really fondly at some of the places that we got to go and to be able to share, you know, going to play at Florida State or going to Hawaii or Cancun with other 19, 20-year olds. It's crazy. So I think that that was really incredible. I think going into it, one of, I guess I could say a con and more so just naivety on my side is I was very involved in high school, like student government and clubs and stuff. And in my head, I was thinking like, I want to do student government in college. And like in my head, I was like, maybe I can travel abroad for like a summer semester, like, which is so silly. I like laugh at myself now, like LOL funny, because there's no way. I mean, you get a few weeks off when you're in college and you don't have energy to do anything but sleep. Um, so I think like looking back, I would have liked some of those other experiences, but I mean, you can trade them for the ones that I did get, right? And I think too, like one of the cons that probably every person who played at the collegiate level experiences is just the wear and tear on your body. I mean, I was talking with an old teammate the other day, and we were talking about NIL and like so excited for all the girls. Like, go get your bag. We're so jealous, but we're happy for you guys that you can make money. I'm like, you know what I wish they would do for us? Like, we don't need a retroactive paycheck, but I wish they'd cover like my medical bills that are associated to injuries from playing in college. Like that, I would sign up for. So I
Oh
think
my God.
like
I mean,
they're
so
all
true,
trade offs.
but
Yeah, I know, right? But I think, ultimately also there's something major to be said, especially in this economy of like graduating without debt as well. So I was fortunate to have a full ride. So to be able to start my professional life without having to worry about student loans and having that debt tagging along with me, I definitely don't take for granted either. So that's a huge pro as well.
I think that's a huge call out. And I think it's not even, I mean, it's not addressed enough. Obviously, like there's so many kids and former student athletes that are in so much debt, and not just student athletes, but students that are just carrying that baggage along for so many years. So it's hard to think about, being in your 30s and having some of those debts attached to you. So I hear that. And that's obviously a major pro for anyone that can get any type of either academic or athletic scholarship. How did you get your foot in the door to work for Learfield the year right after? So like, what did that look like? That transition? So let's go back a little bit. What were you
Yeah.
studying, and how did that then lead to, that your next year after your post grad year? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, no, great question. And that also is a good point about how naive I was going into college. Like I ended up majoring in communications, minoring in business, but I had like other thoughts in my mind of things I wanted to do. And I just didn't realize like there's sacrifices you have to make, and you kind of have to choose like classes and majors that fall within your practice schedule as well, right? So
Yep.
I kind of played with what I was passionate about that would fit into that. um, and with my degree, I needed to do an internship my senior year, an unpaid internship, and so I started working in the uh, it's called Ram Sports Properties, but the Learfield office, which prior to Learfield it was called Nelligan. So I was basically just dedicating some time to learning that portion of the business. A lot of it is if you think about like you go to a basketball game, right? A collegiate women's basketball game, and there's all these in-game promotions, like the tees for threes, for example. Like a lot of the dirty work behind that is what the internship is about. So rolling up the tees and putting rubber bands around them so you can shoot them out of the gun. Folding up the pizza boxes for the cheerleaders so that when they run up into the stands, people can get their free pizza. So A lot of it was that kind of stuff, which I enjoyed because you get to be in the gym. For me, I've always enjoyed kind of the business aspect behind sports. So I did that my senior year for a couple months, I think maybe a full semester. And then that translated into a job for Learfield where I was basically, I think the job was like contract fulfillment. So all of these sponsors that we had, like what are the different things that are within that contract? Do they get signage? Is it like a money grab situation at a football game? Like all the fun sort of promotions that you see now. And it was kind of making sure that we held good on our end to hitting all of those deliverables. And then in addition, trying to grow our sponsor base and trying to sign on new local businesses or national businesses to helping to fund and support Colorado State athletics. So I did that for about a year. It was great. I mean, I feel for my bosses at the time because I'm pretty sure it was like a position they had to make up for me. It was kind of like a glorified paid internship. I mean, I think I made $20,000 that year, lived with my parents. But I learned so much. The people I worked with were incredible. They took me under their wing. During the, like, think of like November, right? You've got football going, you've got volleyball, and you've got men's and women's basketball from like the typical revenue building sports. So like I was responsible for all of those in the contract fulfillment. So you're working like 80, 90 hours a week if you're working a full day and then going to all these games, prep, cleanup, and all of that. So I think that was like a really good jolt into the professional world. Like, hey, you better bust your ass and show you can do this. And yeah, we're going to pay you a little bit to get by, but like you need to prove that you can do it first. So, don't take that for granted at all. And actually, in many respects, that role helped me to transition to the Under Armour role.
And I don't think there's enough that can be said about like proving yourself within an internship and meeting the right people and, being kind through that process and, just going into those things with an open mind on like, how much can I be a sponge here? I want to learn everything. And then that ultimately led you to that year after college. It's also pretty cool because, you were a college athlete at Colorado State. So you went through it as the athlete with that perspective. And then you kind of flipped it and were able to see it from the grunt workers, the game day workers that are there 50, 60 hours. It's crazy how much gets put on their shoulders. And you don't see that as an athlete. You see the finished product, you're there, you're on the court and you go home. But there's so much respect for those types of people that are kind of putting in their hours so that when a spectator or a coach or a player shows up, they're having the best experience they can.
Completely. I think like there's a lot of value, especially as you're just coming out of college. There's a lot of value outside of just your paycheck that you need to start learning and experience that you gain and connections that you make. And I think I don't want to generalize, but in some of what I've seen, a lot of people coming out of college right now want to jump right into a full-time paying role. And, there's this mindset of like, I deserve to be promoted every single year and I should be making this. And I think on one hand, you are your own advocate and you should be fighting for what you deserve, but you also have to put in the time. And for those of us that really like played sports our whole life, like I didn't really have any work experience. I mean, working camps in college, but that's not real work. You're just playing basketball with 8-year-olds. So for me, it was necessary for me to even land a legit job because I was like, I've got nothing on my resume. I mean, I can talk to you about, the sports that I played, but aside from that, like I bring nothing to the table from a strictly professional standpoint.
Yeah, great point. Can you transition us into your role with Under Armour? So, how was the experience? You first, you leave Learfield. How did you ultimately get that job? Did you have a connection that led you to that position? Were you interviewing for it? What did that look like?
Yeah, and I'll get a little bit personal here too. So I was at Learfield. I was very passionate about the brand, and maybe I'll back up quickly and say when I played at CSU, we were Russell head to ankle, for 3 years. So our uniforms, our travel gear, everything, training gear was Russell. And then we went Under Armour my senior year, full head to toe. But from freshman year to junior year, excuse me, we were Under Armour footwear, which I always laugh about because Under Armour started making footwear in 2010. So we were basically the guinea pigs. My freshman year was 2010 of the first ever basketball shoes that Under Armour was making and the first several iterations. So I got introduced, to wearing the brand on court via their footwear in basketball, which is, generally not the first thing that you think of when you were thinking of Under Armour at that time. So I was really excited by my senior year to get out of Russell, no disrespect to them, but, and then go full head to toe in UA as an athletic department. And so that was my first handshake with them. I was super passionate about what the brand stood for. I loved their gear, even as a student athlete, and even in 2014, we've come a long way. So I kind of had it in the back of my mind, but the I guess hurdle a little bit was that they were also in Baltimore, Maryland. Now, at this same time, I was dating my ex-husband, and he moved to Baltimore to go work. He was a professional athlete and he got drafted by the Ravens. And so I kind of came to this crossroads where I was like, are we going to keep doing long distance and I'm just going to kind of keep treading water here? Or do I want to jump in both full with the relationship and also, oh, wow, their Under Armour's headquarters are out of Baltimore, Maryland. So I ended up moving out there. I had applied to entry-level positions prior to moving out there and was getting no bites, which if you think about it, like I'm applying for customer service jobs. They're not going to fly me out there to interview for customer service. Like they'll just choose from the local DMV community. So nothing really came to fruition until I was kind of boots on the ground there. And then I was able to apply and get some interest, and Under Armour's interview process is extensive. I'm sure like a lot of corporations. I remember like, you get your resume picked out and they're like, okay, you've made it to the next round. And then that round is like this very weird video conference where it's not even like I'm talking to a person, like I'm talking to you now. You're just staring at yourself in the screen, answering these questions, which is so uncomfortable. And then it's like a writing portion. And then if you pass that stage, then you go to the actual in-person interviews, which is like a legit gauntlet. It's like 5 or 6 interviews back to back. And I was nervous and very excited, but ultimately it translated to a job for myself, and started kind of at the bottom in customer service. And I can't say enough about the value of starting in customer service or kind of at that entry level position for anyone wanting to get into a big corporation. I think like, of course you learn how to deal with people, how to deal with difficult people, upset people. But you also learn the basics of the company. Like I learned everything from product to our processes to our ordering windows. I was servicing specifically our mid-major division ones. And so, you learn about the urgency that people need to get their product. And, we're not curing cancer. It's t-shirts and shoes that we're selling, but at the same rate, like if Susie busts through a basketball shoe on Wednesday's game, like she needs a replacement by Saturday and there's no other option. So like you learn how to work within an urgent timeline. And so I did that for probably maybe a year and a half or 2 years within customer service. And it was amazing. I mean, I had so much fun. I learned so much. Again, just like a general theme of my experience, I had really good people around me and managers to allow me different experiences. And then kind of similar to the episode with Carolyn Doty, like I was ready to take the next step, but I didn't really know how to get there. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So I started just kind of volunteering to help with events and projects. So my who would become my manager, Erin, kind of pulled me under her wing. She's like, we're going to NCAA volleyball Final Four. We need help with the UA booth for the coaches show. We need help with the activation, which to me was a dream. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to travel. I get to see a Final Four. I love watching volleyball. And I get to rep the brand while I'm there. Like, I'm in. And so I got to do that, and a couple other instances like that. And then ultimately a position open on that team within kind of women's team sports specifically. And I was able to transition. So that's kind of how I got out of customer service and made it more into the sales realm. And then in that role, what we really focused on all of our time was women's team sports, which to me, of course, felt exciting, easy, authentic. Like, I could talk all day about it. So what we would do is basically help to train the sales field on what a female athlete needs to perform out of our line. And then also inversely work with our product team to say, hey, we've got holes here. We're needing, a performance short for our track athlete. So to me, that was super cool. I'll always be passionate about that. And it was an introduction to our much larger network throughout the country of like all the people that we work with who buy UA gear. So I did that for probably two-ish, three-ish years. And then that sort of flowed into the club specific role where we met, Alice. And so we noticed this growing market of club, which is still massively growing, right? And we're like, we make a youth line, we make women's stuff, we make boys stuff, girls stuff. Like, we should be able to outfit these teams that, want to wear a global brand. And it was really new because if you think about, I'm sure you played club sports growing up as well. Like, you were wearing in club, like some rinky dink, quick turn, no name, like whatever. And you were lucky to get something that fit you, and it wasn't a thing. But with how much club's grown and how serious parents and athletes are getting about it, like, they want the best of the best. If they're going to be performing against their future college coach, like, they want the best performance gear. So we recognize the opportunity. Erin, my manager, kind of put a team together and we started to get after it. And I did that for probably 3 or 4 years. And I would focus mainly on men's and women's basketball, just with my background, and then volleyball and softball. And then my counterpart, Sam, did a lot of the men's sports. And actually he weighed in on softball too. So he was kind of the diamond sports guy. Men's lacrosse, baseball is his big one. So that's how we attacked it. And we did it by sport specialty. And I did that all the way up until October of this past year, where I'm in my current role, which is now within team sports still. But it focuses on the institutional side. So institutional meaning high school and small college. So now I've taken this pivot of back into the school realm and outfitting athletes for their school season or at the college level. And the shift in the sport focus has been pretty drastic because it's probably no surprise, but at pretty much any level, like, football is the big sport. It's the main revenue driver. It's where most of the resources are put behind. So kind of a long sort of journey to where I'm getting now, and learning that last aspect of the business, from starting in college with customer service, going to women's, going to club, and now high school and college again. But it's been hugely educational for me. It's been a different type of challenge. And in a couple months, I'll be on year 9 with the brand.
Well, thank you for taking me through the whole journey. You have so many nuances within these positions that I kind of want to get into, if we could. Women's specific role, where you were looking at the women's teams and players, and then you were able to talk to, getting information directly from the field and being able to bring it over to the product line and say, here are the kind of the holes that we're seeing in women's sports. What were the what were the ways that you guys were looking at women's sports differently from men's sports? And, previously to the last 10 years, I think athletic wear was just like one size fits all. It's a unisex size, which is actually men's. And now it's being tailored towards women's. Obviously, we're seeing there's a massive market for athleisure wear and all these different things that are women's focused. So what was the conversation then about how we're going to approach the women's space and the girl space?
Yeah, I'm so happy you asked that because that was really what I focused like all of my energy on, and I'm so proud of UA as a brand as far as what we've contributed to this. But um, to your point, like, and I think about when we went full UA in 2014 at CSU, we were wearing women's stuff that was Under Armour, but it was still like what you would think of as women's stuff, like cap sleeves, short, boxy, like just doesn't fit female athletes. So that's kind of where we started as a brand. Fast forward a couple of years, we really invested in making products built for her by her, meaning we had former D1 athletes that were building our line and understood like the unique body types that and functions and movements that she needs to perform with. And so there was like very much this notion in the industry outside of UA of like what we call pink it and shrink it. So like if you were to get a women's tee, it would essentially be like, okay, well, this volleyball girl wants a t-shirt. Well, let's just make it smaller. Let's throw a traditional girly color on it and call it a women's tee. And we took a very hard stance against that. And so we as in, really our product team spent a lot of time doing focus groups, meeting with our partners, asking what girls were looking for. Um, and to their credit, it's really hard for female athletes. Like number one, especially if you played at a high level, you're very cognizant of your body and how it looks in certain things. If you think about female athletes, like we were outfitting gymnasts to softball players to volleyball players and everything in between, which are vastly different body types built specifically for that sport, right? So I give our team a lot of credit in trying to create a line that she felt empowered that she could wear, she felt comfortable in, and that she had just as many options in the team catalog as he did. So I think that was something that was really exciting and figuring out where we could push the envelope. And this product was both on the court and field and off, right? So we made uniforms that were meant to serve that function, but also training gear, travel gear, and coaches gear. And so it's a big undertaking. But I still feel, I know I'm biased, but I still feel like far and away we've got the best assortment for female athletes and female coaches, just from a fit perspective, textiles, innovation, fabrics, all of that. So that was a heavy focus and still is a very, very heavy focus in us being able to give her the best of the best, just like he gets.
Absolutely. And to go back to talking about pink it and shrink it, like I'll give you an example. My wife played collegiately up here in New England, and their gear was just the leftover football gear. It was the Reebok gear that was two sizes too big, and we still have it to this day. And it's like it fits great for hanging around the house. But she always said, "Oh yeah, these were the leftover football. That's why we got it." And obviously, they had a big deal with Reebok, and were able to get some of that promotional item. I'm assuming, which is why they just kicked it over to the women's sports. Like, here you go, ladies. This is what you're going to get. So. I think things are changing quickly, which is great, but I do think it's not that long ago that things were not equal by any means, especially at the collegiate level. So I really, I appreciate what you're saying about Under Armour kind of taking a stance and saying like there are so many differences between the female body and the male body and the way that we perform. So it's interesting to look at it. I'm so curious about your role now. So you're kind of alluding to this the other day on a call. You're in kind of locker room settings. You're in kind of that male dominated that room now, and it's a little bit of a difference between your previous role. So, how are you received as a female kind of leader in the space, and how do those conversations go when you're talking about football? When I'm sure the notion is, you weren't a formal football player, and what does that look like?
Yeah, yeah. I'll be really honest. Like when this role got presented to me and this opportunity, one of my biggest reasons why I might not take it is the hesitation of, number one, I'm doing what I love right now, and I can speak about women's sports, club sports, like all day. Like it's just innate to me and like in my fabric, I feel like. So you're going to go from that to now discussing football jerseys and girdle pads and getting into the locker room with all the football coaching staff. And that's a pretty significant mind change for me. And so I ultimately took it because I thought this is a great opportunity to grow. Like if you can go in there and you can know your shit and be buttoned up and be able to, give them the answers that they need and walk them through the line and give them their options. Like ultimately, I felt like most people would respond positively and be supportive. And that's been the case. Like I can sense some hesitation sometimes. And, I try not to I don't get too offended by that because I think about like, if somebody were to sell me basketball uniforms and it was somebody who had never played basketball before, of course I'm going to be like, what do you know? Like you've never done like a shuffle drill. Like you don't know how much we sweat during the game. So like in some respects, I try not to get too much into my head about it. It's like, yeah, I haven't played this sport. So there's certain things I'm not going to be able to talk like X's and O's with you, but you don't need that from me as your Under Armour rep. You need me to tell you like, what's the life cycle of this uniform? What colors can you get this in? So once I kind of like adjusted that and was able to like shift my mindset a little bit, I think it made me more confident going into those meetings. But it is different. I mean, in sporting goods in general, it is such a male dominant industry. And it's kind of like referred to a lot as sort of the old boys club or the old guys club, because you think about like little Johnny grows up, he plays football, he's an all-star, he goes to play in college, then he becomes a coach, and then he becomes a rep. And it's just this network of everyone that knows each other. And it's a little bit intimidating to break into if you haven't played football, if you're a female. So it's like kind of a self-talk I have to have with myself when I go into those situations. And I know that I'm going to be, meeting a 15-person coaching staff in their locker room. Like it's just more research I have to do on my side. Because the last thing I want to do is go in there, not know what I'm talking about, like fumble over my words, act like I'm not confident, and then prove probably some of their points or any sort of like stereotype they might have had in their head ahead of time. So yeah, it's been much different. It's been really great for me to get me out of my comfort zone a little bit. And I will say, like, most, if not everyone that I've really worked with on a close level has been fantastic about it. I think like a new rep, regardless of male or female, like is a new rep, and somebody is going to be a little bit hesitant towards it. So I think like once I crossed that threshold, they were a little bit more open. But yeah, it's a different world. It's football all the time, and my territory. I have 5.5 states, and 2 of them include Oklahoma and like Dallas, Fort Worth metro, all the way up to the north and east border of Texas. So it is Friday Night Lights, small town football. The town lives and breathes it. So luckily I love that TV show. But it's different. I mean, you go from, volleyball girls where you set up an event for them and you have a selfie camera, and there's places where they can draw on the board, and there's a 360 like little meme maker, and then you go into the locker room and it's like, we have so and so on Friday, like how are we going to play them? But I think like, again, if I take a step back, it's really good for me to learn and to put myself in situations where it's a little bit uncomfortable so that I can grow. So that's been definitely the positive of it.
I really appreciate you saying that, like getting out of your comfort zone. Obviously, you can't say enough about how valuable that is and those experiences are. The amount of rooms I have been in, just in club basketball, where it is all men, all the time. And, you just have to like have this like kind of a naive confidence about yourself. Like, nope, I do know what I'm talking about. And once you kind of gain that, you kind of feel like you're gonna be all right. And then you just kind of roll with it. And I think relationships are so important. Once you kind of get the right key people that kind of believe in what you're doing, and you can kind of, build on those types of opportunities with the right people. Um, to go back a little bit to your, you getting out of your comfort zone a little bit. Have there been opportunity or times at Under Armour where you've failed or you felt like you failed, that you were like, oh my God, this wasn't a successful moment for me and I could have approached this differently?
Yes. Yeah, I feel like more often than probably than I'd even care to say. But I can give you a couple examples. So one failure, and then it kind of turned into the biggest opportunity to grow was back in 2018. I was within the club division at this point, and we were looking to launch the girls UAA, which for those not familiar who are listening, that is the Girls Under Armour Association. It is basically a UA sponsored basketball circuit at the club level. And we had been operating the boys UAA for I think 7 years up to that point, very similar to like Nike EYBL. So what we decided as a brand is that we really wanted to get behind building out the girls circuit. Like number one, we had to from an equity standpoint. Like the girls deserve to have something just as incredible and the chance to be as visible as the boys were. So because of my background and because I was really passionate about this project in particular, I wound up kind of running point on it from the Under Armour perspective, or at least like building out what this could look like. And granted, at this point, I was not, only a few years into the brand. So like this is a really big project for me that I did not want to mess up. And I think like back to our point earlier when we were talking about like game day operations and all the stuff that happens behind the scenes that you never think about when you're playing. Like this was that, right? You think about putting on an event circuit for at a high level for club girls basketball, and it was overwhelming all that we had to get done within a short period of time. So like we had our three-step partners who were running kind of the events and logistics side of it, scheduling the tournament brackets. How do we want everything to look? Where the location's going to be? What's the capacity for coaches at the gym? What have you? And then from the brand standpoint, a lot of what we had to do is, okay, what is the budget? How much free product do we want to stand for these athletes? What does that product look like? What's the color scheme? What's the branding? What's our message behind this? How do we want to choose teams based on geographical locations that are hotspots for us as far as targets in the market? So it was a lot to wrap my mind around. But I still I can still feel this pit in my gut. So my first big failure was I was trying to project the budget for this from the UA side, specific to the product. And I had never done anything like that before, and it wasn't my money. So stakes are high. And so I was trying to figure out, how many uniforms can we give these athletes? What kind of travel suit can we give them? How many pairs of shoes? What's the cost of that? What's the wholesale price of that? What's UA's cost of that? How many teams times how many age groups times how many athletes? So like, I am not by any means a tech whiz, but like the Excel sheet for this was insane. And so basically, to make a long story short, what I had done, the number that I had given as far as what this was going to cost us was the wholesale number. Or excuse me, I gave them the retail number. So what it really was is going to be double what I asked for to begin with. And so I just remember the day that this clicked, and I was like, I won't discuss the specific figures, but I was like, oh my gosh, I just gave them half of what this is actually going to cost us. And then I started like reeling. I was on a work trip in California, and I was like, I just sat there at my computer for like 2 minutes, and I was like, I could get fired over this. Like, I am committing money that is not mine, that is not really my department's. Um, but then, I just had to come clean with it quickly so that we could figure out what we were going to do. Like, do we need to cut teams? Do we need to cut age groups? And luckily, my leadership team was incredibly supportive. There was really, I mean, they were just kind of like, we get it. It's going to be a lot more. What do we need to do to make this work? So it ended up being fine, but that was a big fail. Definitely a big fail. And then I think one that maybe more from like a personal standpoint and just like being a woman in the workplace. I had mentioned my relationship. So I got divorced in 2021. And I think, and this isn't even specific to sports, but I'm sure, a lot of people, not even women, a lot of people can relate to this. Like when you have a divorced marriage or a failed relationship, like it just hits you different, right? Like nobody signs up going into marriage thinking that it's ever going to end. And so, especially with mine, I felt like because he had played professionally, it was a little bit more public than just like a normal relationship. And he was so involved in sports, and I'm working at a sporting goods company. So to me, especially early on, that felt like a huge failure and was really hard for me to navigate emotionally in going through this divorce, which was exhausting and like used every bit of energy that I had. And you're not eating and you're not sleeping, but you still have to work. Like you still got hours in the day, you still have to produce. And so on the other end of this phone call doesn't care what you're going through. Like he might be MFing you because he didn't get his jerseys on time. So that was, I think one of the hardest, like personal and again, like growth lessons is figuring out how to navigate going through something that is just like has you completely gutted on your personal side and trying not to let that seep too much into the work side, which I cannot say I was perfect. Again, I'm very lucky that I had great people around me who gave me a lot of grace, I'm sure a lot of days. But that felt like a failure at the time. And I know it's not. And we won't get into the full psychological side of all of that. But I think it's something that probably a lot of women can relate to. And I know, I don't have kids myself, but I know a lot of friends professionally who have gone through losing children and losing family members and just the real grief of life is really hard to navigate when you're trying to perform at a very high level within a corporation. So that was a really tough bit of adversity that I'm proud to have gotten through now. But yeah.
I mean, thank you for your candor and just being completely honest and truthful about that. And I think Carolyn and I talked about this offline the other day. Like, there's just not enough people humanizing all of these experiences that we're all going through. Yours is divorce, but whether it's, even when I was going through pregnancy as a college coach, I was a head coach and I was pregnant. And my God, that experience, I didn't know which way to turn to have support for that. I mean, I was nursing at halftime. I felt like I was doing a half-ass job at motherhood and a half-ass job at being a head coach. And I was young, and there's just not enough support and people talking about it. So for you to say those things is so impactful because it matters. Like those are experiences that you went through. And guess what? Maybe some days weren't your best, but as Caroline said the other day, don't let it be 2 days. All right. Second day, we're going to pull ourselves out of bed. We're going to move forward. And women are incredible. As we know, we can do crazy, hard things and get out on the other side and fail forward. And now we're at this point. So thanks for being just like super honest and candid about that. Appreciate that.
Of course. Yeah. And I
I
think
would,
like Alice, to your point, oh, I'm sorry to cut you off.
no,
But
no,
part
go
of the
ahead. There's a
reason why
lag
I'm
time.
so, oh, okay. Sorry.
Keep going.
Part of the reason why I'm so like inspired and excited by this podcast too is because I think there is so much value in talking about the shared experiences that we have that have been shushed for a long time. And so I think like for me, if you're a female former athlete or even not, and you're looking to get into a male dominant industry, whether it's the sporting goods industry or sports in general, um, the best thing that I did and that I feel lucky to still have is surround myself with other like-minded females that may not be going through the exact same thing as me, but they might be breastfeeding and they might have figured out the perfect way to conceal breastfeeding on a WebEx call when you have to, or they might have figured out the best way to manage your day when you're first coming back to work after maternity leave and allowing pockets of time for you to adjust, like things that I haven't even got into yet, but that they're going through, and vice versa. Like, I think it's invaluable for us to talk about this stuff, and there's not a ton of us in this industry, so to be able to relate to each other in a variety of ways and just have like a safe space to be honest and gritty and real.
Absolutely. If we could shift a little bit and pivot towards, I'm curious about the future of Under Armour, your future. What are you excited about? Trends in youth sports, trends in women's sports. Like what's the next step for UA? What's the next step for Haley Gilmore?
Yeah, I am so excited about the direction of our brand right now. I think we have been a little bit quiet, I would say, over the past 5 or so years, and quiet from storytelling perspective, marketing, product. But we are really putting ourselves in a position to become like the major brand that we are and be able to tell our story in an amplified way. And a few of the things to be specific that I'm really excited about. So we just hired a new product officer. His name is Yassine Saidi. He came from Puma and was basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I feel basically responsible for kind of reviving the streetwear and sneaker culture that is booming again at Puma right now. He's extremely well connected. He understands that there's a purpose to performance driven sports product, but also we need to tie in a culturally relevant trend component to that. So he understands the push and pull of that. And in particular, I mean, we can see his work already, and the product team we just launched last week a collaboration with Balenciaga, which to me is like a dream. Like, I am obsessed with fashion, sportswear, street culture. And so for us to be able to tie our names to like a hot brand right now, like Balenciaga, is major for us because we haven't been big in the collaboration market recently. And so that's super exciting. I'm like at the edge of my seat myself, wondering what we're going to do next and waiting to see the full collection when it comes out in spring, summer 25. So I think collabs is something to keep an eye out for. Something that I really relate to with my personal style and that I love that's going on right now is this idea of like androgynous clothing or like gender fluid, like combining something that's a little bit more traditionally masculine looking with traditional feminine looking things and how you mix and match that. So we've started to do that a lot with unisex styles that we're dropping that you can feel incredible in no matter who you are, what you identify as, what size you are. That type of stuff I love because I feel like being able to mix and match and to do it with confidence is like such an important part of how you present yourself. So that's super exciting to me. And then like not new for us, but always going to be at the forefront of what we release and what we build is going to be like innovative products and, first of its kinds and solutions for performance. So for example, like right now we've got out what we call the Slip Speed shoe, which this is my shameless product plug. You can tell I'm in sales. But it's a Slip Speed, and basically it's like a performance trainer that you can wear to run, to walk, whatever, but you can put your foot out of it and slide it back in so that it's almost like a croc. So it's incredibly versatile, so easy if you're either an athlete or if you're like washed up like us and you just need something to kick around to go to the grocery store. It's incredible. I'm obsessed with it. I've got multiple pairs. So like the Slip Speed is a great example of like true Under Armour innovation. We've got this new hat out called Stealth Form, which is essentially like a baseball cap that you could crumple up, throw in your back pocket, throw it in your backpack, put it in your golf bag, and it will resume its original form no matter how many times you've squished it or washed it. So that kind of stuff to me is really cool because I feel like within our industry, talking about, sporting brands, it's really saturated with a lot of people that are just making another tee to make another tee. And like we've always very much been a like performance driven brand. Like we want to have a solution for the athlete. We want to make something that actually has a story or a purpose behind it, as opposed to just throwing another hoodie out into the world right now. So that stuff is always really exciting. And I don't know, for me, that's a really good question. I mean, I feel like there is a large opportunity right now, and I'm talking about specifically within team sales, for us to embrace this streetwear trend that's going on right now. I mean, think about it, Alice, you're a coach, you're a director, like you're going to go to tournaments and you might not necessarily want to wear like the team swarm hoodie, right? Like you might want to wear what's the hottest, latest and greatest thing that UA just dropped. Like that's what I want. Or I want to wear the UA Balenciaga collab. Like that's what I want to that's what I want to wear when I'm representing my program. So I feel like there's a really good opportunity for us to draw a line between what we're currently doing right now in team with your traditional tees, shoes, backpacks, and what we've got going at retail, which is really exciting. And especially in what's to come from some early line plans, like very, very hot, very like trendy. So I think that if I could do that, if I could figure out a way to make my job part of that opportunity, I would love it. If I had all the money in the world and I didn't have to worry about paychecks and I was going to do something outside of UA, I would open up my own styling agency and like help be a stylist for female athletes. And specifically to me, like it's really exciting the exposure that we're getting, not only at the pro level, like you look at the tunnel walks with all the WNBA athletes right now and US women's national team for soccer, football. But like even at the collegiate level with NIL, like these girls can afford to wear like luxury brands depending on some of their deals. And they have like legit tunnel walks going into games now, which is wild to me to even think about. But for me, like that's another huge opportunity is like, how can we make sure that these female athletes have like the same exposure to brands, in specifically like luxury fashion houses that all the men do? And like, how can we get them outfitted and repping that as well, which is super exciting to me. I know I could ramble on all day about this, but like perfect case in point to me is Caitlin Clark, for the WNBA draft, going number one. She was wearing full head to toe Prada with Prada sunglasses and purse. And it was the first time ever that Prada's outfitted an athlete going into the draft of any sport, male or female, which to me is like, whew, that lights my fire. I'm like, there's something there. There's a market. Women are the ones that are buying in the household anyway. So yeah, that's a really long response to your question, but overall, I'm very encouraged about the future of UA as a brand and also the future of just women in sport and all the things that we can do and are getting notoriety for.
I mean, that was an awesome explanation. I didn't know that about you, how interested in the fashion side you were. Dawn Staley kept flashing into my head as you were kind of discussing that, and obviously what she's doing for just the sidelines of like coaching as well. I mean, we were so buttoned up as I was going through the coaching experience. It was pretty brutal, to be honest with you. we were traveling in our suits and we've got the blazers constantly. And now that things have shifted so much, especially after COVID, people are finding their identity a little through fashion and what you can look like on the sidelines. It's changed so much. And a big thanks to Dawn and like how she's just paved her own way. And it's just been so cool to watch. So I feel like, I mean, what a cool place that you're in right now, that you're able to see it from a big brand standpoint, but also like have the innovative ideas around like what this is going to look like over the next 5 years, specific to some of the money coming into women's sports. So I'm excited to watch your future. You are just an absolute badass. You are so interesting. And so I'm just incredibly humbled to be able to talk to you. Just your authenticity and the way you approached this conversation. I'm really, truly thankful.
Well, thanks for saying that, Alice. This was so fun, and hopefully I didn't ramble too much on anything. I could talk about this all day, but thank you for putting this together. There's most certainly a need. I hope that anyone watching these can take some nuggets away, and it'll help them on their journey. And I look forward to staying in touch and seeing what Swarm does, huh?
Absolutely.